The time is 11:08 hours. The din of battle within La Balle d'Almont has reached its crescendo. This tumultuous ordeal of man and machine now boils down to its most basic components: survival and consequence. For those combatants still in the game, the final measure of victory or defeat is merely a byproduct of duty and circumstance, derived from every soldier's innate desire to endure. Besieged and plagued by attrition, the Hamlet contingent is now all that remains of Kampfgruppe Eckel. A body of soldiers comprising less than a platoon, their defensive positions within the farmstead nevertheless provide a degree of cover unavailable to their assailants, a tactical advantage Lieutenant Eckel intends to exploit.
Meine Männer und mich von Uvenmund zu entfernen, hatten die Amerikaner keine andere Wahl als offenen Grund zu durchqueren und uns direkt zu verpflichten.
In order to dislodge my men and I from Armand, the Americans had no other choice than to cross open ground and engage us directly. The soldiers within the south irrigation ditch posed the most immediate threat to our survival. Although their proximity and size was intimidating, this was also their greatest liability. They were crowded into a limited parcel of terrain that offered very little protection. Therefore, when the time was right, we pounced on the ditch with as much firepower as we could muster. Several GIs fell victim to the smothering torrent of lead. To my satisfaction, many enemy troops disengaged the fight and began to systematically retreat beyond the stone footbridge. Imminent assault had been averted. I might have construed this as a small victory if it hadn't been for the mass of enemy activity besetting us from everywhere else in the Vale.
Lieutenant Eckel pauses from the firefight long enough to witness 3rd Platoon leave station behind the north crop field and bound forward to the east irrigation ditch. The GIs dash past Lieutenant Waters' Stewart and take up positions in the muddy depression behind the northeast crop field. Their diminished numbers notwithstanding, this salty band of citizen soldiers is finally poised to execute their primary mission orders. Having risen from the cover of his foxhole to warn Eckel of 3rd Platoon's activity, a lone German scout attracts the attention of a host of Americans, including the immobile No. 1 Stuart atop the knoll crest. The tank unleashes both its bow machine gun and main armament upon the soldier. After a valiant attempt to defend himself, the scout is wounded and takes to flight. However, his endeavor to remove himself from harm's way is abbreviated by a surge of mixed gunfire. In an interesting twist of impetus, the German fanatic, who is the last survivor of the west flank contingent, begins crawling his way up the southern slope of Point Andy. Concealed in the grass and shadows, he believes the Americans atop the bluff to be so preoccupied with the action against Almont that his survival is a mystery to them. Possessing but a single clip of cartridges, his motivation is to recover the MG-42 light machine gun and ambush the unsuspecting GIs. His plan appears to be succeeding when the command team suddenly detects his activity. The medic sniping Nazi finally meets his end within only feet of his goal. Back in Almont, the battle continues without respite. The Americans of 2nd Platoon have deployed a more effective skirmish line within the crop field and proceed to discharge a storm of lead into the collection barn. The firefight with the surviving Germans located inside the structure is intense, but brief. It is the GIs who place a more concentrated salvo of shot on target. The end result is a German west flank that is manned by only 2 soldiers and vulnerable to assault. During this exchange, an automatic rifleman spots a target of opportunity that entices him to shift fire. Whilst bounding forward, Lieutenant Spitzer's Stube becomes visible between the rear echelon buildings and the field house. the U.S. rifleman targets the exposed crew and rakes the assault gun with multiple bursts. Once again, Spitzer is the subject of a small arms attack, yet survives the incident. The German crew promptly descend into their vehicle and pivot to meet the new threat. However, the limited visibility of the internal optics hinders Spitzer. He is unable to isolate the location of the offending weapon and thus refrains reprisal.
Zu diesem Zeitpunkt schien es, als ob die Amerikaner wir rundum waren.
By this time, it seemed as though the Americans were all around us. I could not stick my head out of my vehicle for more than a few seconds at a time without being shot at. Monitoring the flow of battle became exceedingly difficult. In my desire to avoid the small arms fire, we relocated once more. In so doing, the enemy tanks gained a line of sight on us and opened fire. Fortunately, we were head-on to them at that particular moment. Their puny anti-tank shells were ineffective against our frontal armor. On the other hand, the attack damaged both our targeting optics and wireless radio. We returned fire and quickly withdrew to the rear.
Having locked sights on the stationary No. 1 Stuart during the encounter, Spitzer's retaliatory shot rips into the tank, rocking it back on its sponsions. Moments later, the dazed tankers extricate themselves from their disabled vehicle and depart the battlefield. Determined to put as much distance as possible between himself and the enemy, Spitzer deliberately backs his Stug into the muddy fringes of the sunken vale in the hope of buying time to reassess the situation and reevaluate the condition of his vehicle. As for the No. 2 Stug, fearing the possibility of a second mortar strike, they bound forward to expel the last of their high-explosive shells at Point Andy. The round impacts the bluff, therein persuading the command team to withdraw from the crest. During the attack, a diminutive rocket fired from long range arcs over the assault gun and detonates far afield. Under attack from an unseen bazooka, the vehicle promptly vacates the vicinity. Despite their initial success in thwarting the advances of 1st Platoon, Eckel's command post squad is exhausted by the incessant firefight and the looming menace of the Grim Reaper. Rattled by the force ratio disparity, his men are on the ragged edge of battle fatigue, but pursue their duty nonetheless. Adding to their anxiety is the conspicuous maneuvering of the American units, which, in time, will only bring more firepower down upon the hamlet. Emboldened with the prospect of victory, and with bringing this vicious struggle to an end, every infantry platoon of Company B is now either engaging the hamlet or encroaching upon it. From his observation position on Hill 146, Captain Dorn ponders the battle's climax.
The men of my command were on the move all throughout the Vale. Company B was on the verge of putting the Germans in a box. The linchpin to our final assault, however, was the preponderance of suppressive fire. It was imperative that we close ranks with the enemy. North of En Mont, the balance of 3rd Platoon was entering the East Ditch and preparing to ingress the crop field. Likewise, the sniper team had left high ground in order to take up a forward position in the Vale. The panicked men of 1st Platoon had recovered their nerve and were returning to the South Irrigation Ditch to renew the fight. Even the soldiers of 2nd Platoon were exiting the blind cover of the grain in order to support the troops in the nearby ditch. By all accounts, victory was in the air. Yet, I was not so sure.
Making good use of the resupply trucks, Dorn dispatches a group of ammunition bearers and the 30 cal to Point Andy in order to augment the firepower in the Vale. On the surface, all appears copacetic. However, Captain Dorn knows better. Should he employ the mortar battery against the compound, the possibility of collateral casualties to civilians or to any captured American troops taken from the ambushed convoy is highly probable. Moreover, the entire outcome of the battle still hinges on alleviating the threat posed by the German armor. In war, the consequences of a single event can have dramatic and far-reaching effects, as a lone soldier is about to prove. Having crawled along the south ditch to a point within effective range of his weapon, 1st Platoon's brave bazooka man discharges a shaped shell at the southwest barn. The resulting blast silences the Germans' makeshift outpost. For all intents and purposes, the west flank of Albeit is now unprotected and ripe for the picking. This occurrence is all that is needed to push the command post defenders over the brink. In spite of Eckel's pleas for courage, the bulk of the squad breaks from the structure and scrambles southward in the hope of cheating fate just a little while longer. Given the unfavorable situation, Lieutenant Eckel immediately radios for armor support. However, his appeal is in vain. Lieutenant Spitzer's vehicle is effectively deaf, and the number 2 Stug is busy repelling from the farmstead for lack of anti-personnel shells and spooked by the presence of a nearby bazooka. Without warning, the vehicle is inundated with machine gun fire and its engine erupts in smoke. From his vantage point atop Hill 146, Dorn catches glimpse of the perpetrator. Directly behind the assault gun is a new arrival on the battlefield, a U.S. Sherman tank. The U.S. M4A1 is a 30-ton medium tank. The Sherman is America's answer to the array of battle tanks fielded by Germany prior to 1944. Its nickname is derived from the Union Civil War general William Tecumseh Sherman. The tank sports a short-barreled, medium-velocity 75mm main gun that is inferior to the armament of most German panzers at this stage in the war. However, its relative speed and mobility make it more than a match for its contemporary counterparts. Although the Sherman is more vulnerable to attack than the panzers, the M4 and all of its variants will become the most prolifically built tank of the Second World War. It persevered in battle by virtue of its sheer numbers in the field. Lieutenant Lawrence Hendricks of Company F, 66th Armor Regiment commands this singular tank.
My entire tank company was in the midst of refit from the previous day's battle when a perplexing call came in from Regimental. They directed us to engage enemy armor in a nearby hamlet. Curiously, the targets were not along the battlefront. They were directly behind our service park, across the sunken vale. Because my platoon had only 3 operational tanks, the order fell to us to detach from the company. Our biggest challenge was to cross the entire expanse of the muddy field and attack the Germans from the rear, without getting completely bogged down in the process. I ordered the group to travel in column formation, as this presented the best approach to circumventing any impassable terrain we might encounter. By the time we were halfway across the vale, my companion tanks had both gotten stuck in the mire. After bypassing these impediments, my lone Sherman was all that was left to meet the enemy. We snaked our way across the remaining span, all the while expecting to get stranded. However, we managed to negotiate the bog to a point within striking distance of the hamlet. To our good fortune, the German Stugs were not expecting an attack from the rear. They did not detect our approach. I held fire, in the hope of reaching more stable terrain, and engaging the enemy at point-blank range. This, the fates did allow.
Just when it appears as though Captain Dorn's advancing troops will be forced to engage the impervious enemy assault guns at close range, the heretofore predatorial Stugs have now become the game. Yet, who will ultimately rise victorious in this clash of metal and seize the day? You're watching Tales of Virtual Combat on His Story International.